The night she whispered those words, I was already sure the date had failed. I just did not know that something else was about to begin. My name is Dylan. I am 26, and I live alone in a small apartment above an old laundromat on the edge of Portland, Oregon. The place creaks when I walk. My couch came free from Craigslist. My coffee maker barely works, but it gets me through the mornings. By day, I fix laptops, phones, and circuit boards at a repair shop downtown. It is not exciting, but it pays the rent. At night, I jog through misty streets with my earbuds in, lo-fi music playing, trying to quiet the hum in my head. My life is simple, quiet, and honestly, a little empty. Dating has never been my strong side. 3 bad dates in a row can do that to you. One talked about her ex the whole time, one ghosted me halfway through texting, one showed up drunk and tried to sell me crypto. So when I matched with Naina, 23, a communications major with a sharp smile, I told myself this was the last try. We texted for a week. It was fine. Nothing special, but not bad either. Enough to make me hope. We agreed to meet at a small restaurant downtown. Red brick walls, soft candlelight, quiet jazz floating through the air. It felt like the kind of place where something good could start. I arrived 10 minutes early, like I always do. The place was half full. Couples murmured over wine. A waiter moved between tables. That was when I saw her for the first time. She walked up with a calm, steady energy. Brown hair tight back in a neat bun, clean white apron. Her name tag said Sophie. She looked like someone who could handle chaos without letting it touch her face. "Evening," she said, warm but professional. "Table for 2, I said. "I am waiting for someone." She nodded and led me to a small table by the window. Rain streaked down the glass. Portland never disappoints that way. I sat there flipping the menu, trying not to check my phone every few seconds. Naina arrived 7 minutes late. No apology. She slid into the chair across from me, phone already in her hand. She looked like her pictures. Blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, black dress that probably cost more than my rent. But her smile felt tight, like it had a limit. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to start easy. "Fine," she said, eyes still on her screen. Her nails clicked against the phone like tiny taps of impatience. I told her about my job, about fixing a laptop with a fried motherboard that morning. She barely reacted. "So you just fix broken phones?" she said flatly. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. I tried again, telling her about fixing an old phone for my aunt after her husband passed, how it was full of photos she was scared to lose, how she hugged me after I recovered them. It meant something to me. "That's cool," Naina said, without looking up. "There's a guy on TikTok who does that. You should watch him." The jazz felt louder than our conversation. I glanced around the room and noticed Sophie refilling wine at another table. She looked over for just a second. Our eyes met. There was something there. Not pity exactly, more like understanding. Naina ordered salmon without herbs, her tone sharp. I ordered a burger. When Sophie came by to check on us, she looked at me a little longer than needed. "Everything okay here?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said, though it did not feel true. Naina didn't even look up. When she finished eating, she stood suddenly. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her purse. "Thanks for dinner." No offer to split the bill, no real goodbye. She was gone before I could respond. I sat there staring at my half-eaten burger, feeling hollow, like I had wasted my time and a piece of myself. Sophie came to clear the table, stacking plates quietly. She set the bill down, then paused. Her hand rested on the table. "If it were me," she said softly, leaning closer so only I could hear, "I would have stayed." I looked up, surprised. Her eyes were steady, honest, not flirty, just real. Before I could say anything, she turned and walked back towards the kitchen. I paid the bill in a daze and went home, her words replaying in my head. Later that night, an email receipt from the restaurant popped up. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, was a note. "If you need someone to listen, I'm on the evening shift. S." I sat on my couch, lo-fi music humming through the room, and read it again. For the first time that night, I did not feel alone. I did not plan to go back the next night. I told myself it was just curiosity, just unfinished thoughts. But when my shift at the repair shop ended, My feet carried me downtown without asking my brain for permission. The rain was heavier than usual, tapping hard against my windshield as I parked outside the restaurant. The red brick walls glowed warm through the mist, like the building was holding its breath. I sat in the car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, wondering if this was a mistake. Then I remembered her voice. Calm. Honest. I would have stayed. I grabbed my jacket and went inside. The bell above the door chimed softly. The restaurant was quieter tonight. A few tables were filled. The jazz played low, almost drowned by the rain hitting the windows. Sophie stood behind the counter, wiping down a coffee machine. When she looked up and saw me, her face softened into a small, surprised smile. "Back already?" she said. Her voice carried that same warmth as the night before. "Yeah," I said, sliding into the same table by the window. "Guess I'm becoming a regular." She let out a quiet chuckle. "Coffee?" "Black. No sugar." She raised an eyebrow. "Of course." I noticed she remembered. That alone did something to me. She brought the coffee over a minute later, setting it down gently. A napkin sat underneath the mug. I picked it up and noticed a tiny doodle drawn in blue ink. A little screwdriver. I looked up at her. "What's this?" She leaned against the table for a second, a small smirk on her face. "You said you fix things. Thought it fit." Something warm settled in my chest. We talked while she worked. Nothing heavy at first. I asked about the restaurant, and she told me about the dinner rush, about customers who complained just to hear themselves talk. I told her about a guy at my shop who swore his laptop broke because of bad internet energy. "People are strange," she said, shaking her head. "Yeah, they really are." The conversation felt easy, natural, like we were picking up a thread that had been waiting. At one point, she mentioned she moved to Portland from Seattle after a messy divorce. She said it simply, without drama, like she had already carried the weight and learned how to set it down. "So what about you?" she asked. "What's your story, Dylan?" I hesitated, then told her about my dad. How he fixed old radios, how he left me a toolbox when he passed, how I still use the same rusted screwdriver he once held. "It's probably dumb," I said, staring into my coffee, "but it feels like he's still there." She did not laugh, she did not brush it off, she just nodded. "That's not dumb," she said quietly. "That's real." Something shifted right then, like the room got smaller and safer at the same time. After that night, I kept coming back. Not every visit was planned. Sometimes I just ended up there. Some nights I ordered food. Other nights it was just coffee. Always black. Always after work. Sophie always noticed. She started switching me to decaf after 9 without asking. She left a new doodle on my napkin each time. A cracked phone screen, a rain cloud, a tiny smiley face. It wasn't flashy, but it felt like she saw me. One evening, the rain came down hard, the kind that makes the whole city feel underwater. The restaurant was almost empty. Sophie was stacking chairs when I offered to help. She said I didn't have to, but I grabbed a broom anyway. We worked quietly, the sound of rain and soft jazz filling the space. When we finished, she poured the last of the coffee into 2 mugs. We sat at the counter, steam rising between us. "You ever think about doing something else?" I asked. She sighed, tracing the rim of her mug. "I dream about opening my own coffee shop. Nothing big, just good beans, good music, and no yelling about parsley." She smiled, but it faded fast. "I've got a kid, 8 years old. He stays with my mom most days. Taking risks feels hard." "I get that," I said. "I've got ideas too. They just stay in my head." She looked at me then, really looked at me. "You'd be good at more. You've got a steady way about you." The weeks blurred into a rhythm. Work, rain, coffee, Sophie. One night we went running together, sneakers splashing through puddles under streetlights. Another night we sat on a park bench, sharing a thermos, laughing about nothing. One evening she leaned forward and asked softly, "Why do you keep coming back, Dylan? The coffee isn't that good." I thought about it for a moment, then answered honestly, "Because this place is where I can breathe." She did not reply. She just held my gaze, something unspoken passing between us. The next night, when I walked in, 2 cups of coffee were already at my table, steam curled up like an invitation. That's when I knew this was no longer just a habit. It was becoming something else, and I had no idea how quickly it was about to be tested. The weeks with Sophie settled into my life so quietly that I did not notice how much I needed them until they were already part of me. Every evening after work, I found myself walking through that red brick door. The smell of coffee and warm food hit me first, then the jazz, then her. Sophie always knew I was coming. Sometimes she would glance at the clock before the door even opened. A cup of coffee would appear at my table without a word. Black, no sugar. Always right. The napkin doodles kept changing. A tiny circuit board, a pair of running shoes. Once, a simple heart drawn so small I almost missed it. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her son, Max, how he loved drawing superheroes and left his pencils everywhere. How he asked big questions at bedtime that she did not always know how to answer. I told her about the repair shop, about customers who treated their broken phones like lost limbs, about the quiet fear of staying in the same place forever. One night, we ran together again. The rain had slowed to a light mist. Street lights reflected off wet pavement, turning the city into a blur of gold and gray. We laughed when I almost slipped on a puddle. Afterward, we sat on a bench, catching our breath, sharing a thermos she brought. "You're not bad company, Dylan," she said, nudging my shoulder. I smiled. "You're not either." It was not love, not yet, but it felt honest, solid, like something that could grow. Then one Thursday evening, everything shifted. The restaurant was busier than usual. Voices filled the air. I sat at my table, absent-mindedly doodling on a napkin, trying to copy Sophie's style. I was halfway through a clumsy coffee mug drawing when I heard my name. Dylan. I looked up and felt my stomach tighten. Nena stood there, coat draped over her arm, hair pulled back, looking polished and confident, like she had stepped straight out of a magazine. I had not seen her since that terrible date, and I had not thought about her in months. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, smiling tightly. "Yeah," I replied. "I come here a lot." She sat across from me without asking. Her phone hit the table with a soft thud. I wanted to say hi, and maybe apologize. I waited. I wasn't in a good place back then. Things were messy with someone else, but I'm better now. She leaned closer. Maybe we could try again, for real this time. The words hung heavy in the air. My mind flashed back to that first night. Her eyes on her phone, the silence, then Sophie's whisper. I would have stayed. Before I could answer, Sophie appeared beside the table, setting down 2 coffees. Her face was calm, professional, but her eyes caught everything. "Evening," she said evenly. Then I glanced at her, then back at me. "You two know each other?" "I work here," Sophie said simply, then walked away. Nena leaned in again. "So, dinner sometime? Somewhere nicer than this?" I looked at the coffee cups, at the napkin, at the tiny imperfect drawing I had made. I thought about Sophie remembering decaf after 9, about the way she listened, about the way she made space for me. "I'm good," I said finally. "I am exactly where I need to be." Nena's smile faltered, just for a second. Then she stood. "Your loss." She walked out, heels clicking against the floor, the door swinging shut behind her. The jazz swelled, filling the space she left behind. Later, after closing, Sophie and I sat at the counter. The rain streaked the windows again. "She seemed nice," Sophie said carefully. "She wasn't you," I replied. She studied me for a moment. "I have a kid. I have history. I'm not simple." "I don't want simple. I want real." She reached across the counter and brushed her hand against mine. It was small, quiet, but it felt like a promise. And that was when I realized I was no longer just staying. I was choosing. Life did not change all at once. It shifted slowly, the way rain soaks into the ground before anyone notices the streets are wet. After that night, Sophie and I stopped pretending this was just coffee and conversation. We did not rush anything. We let it unfold. I started picking her up after work sometimes. Other nights, she came with me on my jogs. We moved at a pace that felt safe for both of us. A week later, she asked if I wanted to meet her son. Max was 8, all elbows and energy, with a sketchbook tucked under his arm like it was part of him. He looked at me carefully when we met, like he was trying to decide if I was temporary. I did not push. I just asked him about his drawings. His face lit up as he showed me superheroes with tools instead of weapons. "This one fixes things," he said proudly. I smiled. That's my favorite kind. From then on, I was around more. Not in a loud way, just present. Helping with homework, fixing a broken toy, sitting at the kitchen table while Sophie made coffee, the room filled with that familiar smell. One night, while Max was asleep, Sophie sat beside me on the couch. The apartment was quiet except for rain tapping the window. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've done this before, trusted someone. It didn't end well." I took her hand. "I'm not here to run. I'm here to stay." She searched my face, then nodded slowly. Months passed. My old apartment above the laundromat started to feel less like home. Eventually, I moved in with Sophie and Max. It was not perfect. Space was tight, mornings were loud, but it was full, the good kind of full. Then one evening, while we were closing up the restaurant together, Sophie stood quietly by the counter. "I keep thinking about that coffee shop," she said, "the one I always talk about." I looked at her. "Then let's do it." She laughed softly. "It's not that easy." "I know, but we'll figure it out." We did. Slowly, carefully. I sold some tools, took extra shifts, fixed wiring in an old space just outside downtown. Sophie saved every dollar she could. Max helped paint the walls, leaving little hand marks we decided to keep. When the sign went up, it read simply, "Sophie's." The day we opened, rain fell like it always does in Portland. Inside, the lights were warm. Jazz played softly. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. I set up a small workbench by the window, fixing phones while Sophie ran the counter. It worked. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. A year after that terrible date, I stood behind the counter late one night, locking up. Sophie was upstairs reading to Max. I glanced at the wall where a framed photo hung. 2 coffee cups on a table by a rainy window. Beneath it, a handwritten line. "Something start when someone decides to stay." I thought back to that night, the failed date, the half-eaten burger, the quiet whisper that changed everything. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, the sound of laughter drifting down the hall. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I belonged.